I'm not quite sure how to articulate the topic for today's video, but I think it's going to kind of revolve around police officers' attitude or the way that they treat people. And there's a couple things that got me thinking of this topic. One of the things that I don't know, I see a lot in the comment sections of my videos, and I get messages about this quite a bit from people saying, you know, that officer was so nice to that person. Any other officer would have just treated them like garbage, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And I'll often respond to people, say, you know, most officers actually do treat people like this. It's just that you don't get to see it. And then they'll say something to the effect of, you know, I've dealt with police a lot of times in my life and they've never been that nice to me. It's way more complex than you might think. That's why I'm having a hard time even formulating my thoughts on this. But I literally just today, when I was getting ready to leave work, was having a conversation with one of my coworkers about it. It's one of my coworkers who just got a job in the detective bureau, so they're leaving the street after a bunch of years. They have more time on than me. And we were talking about whether or not they're going to miss the street, miss the type of people that we deal with. And we were talking about why we work in the area that we work and why we put up with the things that we put up with. Because I've mentioned before that if I wanted to, I could go to a different part of the city. I don't have to work in an area that forces me to work as hard as I work, but I do, for some reason, I enjoy the area that I work and the type of people that I interact with. But at the same time, it's incredibly exhausting, and it's not necessarily exhausting the way you might think it's exhausting. And a perfect example of that, as I segue into the next one, I was taking a report today and my phone rang. It was one of my co-workers. It's an officer that I went to the academy with, and I don't see her very often. And it's not someone that I'm like super close with. We don't talk to each other very often. If my phone rings and it's her, it's probably work related. We don't call each other to hang out. And I answer the phone. We get our hellos out of the way, and she's like, "Hey, I met one of your friends today, Rodney." And she goes on to tell me about this incident that she had with this guy. Rodney is a guy who I've dealt with many, many times over the years. He has a mental health problem and a methamphetamine problem. He likes to use meth, smoke crack, and drink alcohol. This has a very negative effect on his mental health, causes him to hallucinate, he gets out of control, destroys things. He's been on my body camera channel before. The reason she was calling, because he was saying my name. She ended up arresting him for, I'm not going to get into what the crime was, but he got reconnected with some people that he shouldn't have been reconnected with. Rodney is the guy that I saw, I don't know, a few months ago, and he was sober. He was so proud of himself for being sober. I spoke to him as he was getting ready to go to church. He was literally waiting for the church to open, and he was wearing nice shorts, a nice shirt, nice button-down shirt, real clean cut, telling me how good he felt being sober. And then I saw him again, early last week sometime. And the time that I saw him last week, he actually flagged me down. I was on a side street near his house. I wasn't trying to go see him. I wasn't trying to see him at all. I just was actually trying to turn around and go deal with somebody I saw on the side of the road that I thought needed my attention. I was probably 2 blocks away from this guy, and he's standing in the middle of the road, jumping up and down, waving his arms, because he sees a police car and he needs to tell the police something. This is generally a frustrating thing for police officers, because they're like, if you need us, just call. Because whatever problem you think you have that you need assistance with right now, it can probably wait. There's probably other people I need to get to more. It doesn't matter. But he was jumping up and down, flagging me down. I pulled up to him, and it was Rodney again. He just wanted to talk to a police officer because he was sober. He was feeling good. He was feeling clear-headed. And he's had so many negative interactions with police officers that it was almost like he needed to apologize to a cop. So pulled up with him, said hi, and he was like, "How you?" Just normal conversation. "How you doing, man?" And I knew who he was, so I get out of the car and I'm talking to him. I asked if he recognized my car, if he knew it was me. He's like, "No, man." He's like, I saw an officer. I wanted to talk to him." We had a very long conversation. It was awesome. He gave me a lot of his backstory from when he was in high school and stuff, some of the things that he dealt with. Talked about the people that got him into drugs. Talked about how he got clean from drugs, which he actually got clean by going to jail. I think he was in jail for 3 weeks. And the statement that he made to me was, he's like, I got to where I didn't have any drugs in my system for several weeks, and my head felt clear for the first time in years. And the way he described it, he's like, I just felt so good that my head was clear for a change, that this became my new high. This is what I chase. Now instead of chasing the high that I get from drugs, I'm chasing this high that I get from just being of clear mind. And he was telling me about how he goes to church multiple times a week now. He's quoting the Bible to me. He was actually laughing at one point. He said, he's like, I got so much money now that I'm not spending it all on drugs. He goes, I went and bought a PlayStation 5. And he gives me this like big smile. He's telling me about what video games he plays. He was doing all the right things. He just sits in his aunt's basement where he lives, plays PlayStation, goes to church, goes out, gets food, comes back home. He's even telling me that he was hoping that he could get a job soon, because he knows that if he has a job, that will be another productive thing in his life that he can do that will kind of prevent him from going out and doing drugs and hanging out with people he used to hang out with. Also told me about his ex-girlfriend who he's been staying away from, and how she's still living that life, and it's all bad for her, and he doesn't, he feels bad for her, but he knows that he can't be around her, because if he does, then she'll just suck him back into that world. We had a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And then literally the very next day, I was dispatched on a run dealing with that same guy. He was running up and down the road, banging on everyone's doors, screaming for help, that people were chasing him. I pulled up. He immediately recognized me, called me by name. I'm talking to him. He was dirty. He was wearing the same clothes he was the day before, but it looked like he'd been rolling around on the ground. It was clear to me that he started using meth again. I ended up getting him, he didn't want to ride in a police car, so we ended up getting him an ambulance. He rode in the ambulance to the hospital, where he was checked in for observation, try to get him to sober up. Unfortunately, that's what happens to a lot of, that's what our hospitals are used for in a lot of cases right now. Just someone who, they don't need to be in jail, but they're hallucinating, seeing things. It's not safe for them to be out in public, so they have to go sit in a hospital bed wearing a purple gown for like 4 hours. It is what it is. I had to argue with him for such a long time. He was begging me, telling me that he's not taking drugs and all this other stuff, which clearly wasn't the case. To the point where I had to get kind of stern with him. And I actually reached behind my back, unbuckled my cuff case, and started to pull my cuffs out. I was like, Rodney, I've asked you enough times. I'm done asking you. You're going to go. You're either going to get in the medic, or you're going to go in cuffs, or you're going to go in my car. And that's what got him to comply. Then I talked to his family member. She was tired of it. You know how that stuff goes with people who are addicted to drugs, doing the things that Rodney's doing. Gave her information on how to get him out of her house, because she doesn't want him there anymore. The only reason I'm telling this story is because it's exhausting dealing with these people day in and day out. You try to be as human as you can with them and empathize with them and encourage them, even when they're in altered states, but you can only do so much. And a police officer who spends as much time on the street as I have, and I'm only halfway through my career, so roughly half the police officers out on the street have more time on than me. They've experienced this more times than I have. Your tolerance for putting up with this stuff starts to diminish. That's a very human thing. Um, I can tell you that my tolerance for it is dwindling. Um, and some days I'm better at it than others, but I still have my days where I roll up on someone who's freaking out high, and I'm not going to be super patient with them. I might go ahead and just grab onto them if they're, especially if they're flapping around doing very erratic behavior. I might just go ahead and grab onto them, cuff on, throw them in my car, and say, you know what, I'm not even going to call a medic. I'm just going to take you to the hospital myself. If it is that point where it's clearly alcohol and it's not some kind of hallucinogenic drug, I might go ahead and place that person under arrest, take them to jail. Although with new policies on nonviolent crimes, that option is really being taken out of my hands. But the whole reason I'm telling you this story is because it is exhausting. And when people say, oh, every other officer just would have treated that person like crap, we need more officers like this guy, officers need more training on how to deal with this stuff, that's just not the case. The fact of the matter is, your ability to be compassionate towards these situations erodes over time. I only have so much compassion that I can share with these people, and part of it is because when you're being compassionate towards these people, being incredibly nice with these people, you're giving them a part of yourself. People don't really think about it that way, but you do. It's not that, viewing someone as a human being is a hard thing to do, but there's no other way to describe it. I would say it might be easier to explain the opposite of that, where I can just, it's a lot easier for me as a police officer, and every other police officer for that matter, just to show up on a run and say, you know what, this is my job, this is what I'm getting paid to do, you need to do XYZ, I'm going to make sure that XYZ happens, rather than spend all of the time arguing with people and trying to coerce them into doing things voluntarily, trying to convince them to do what it is that you want them to do. Because at the end of the day, you have the authority. It's your job to make sure that this person does, whatever it is that you need them to do. And you don't necessarily have to wait for them to go willingly or make that decision on their own. And for the officers who act that way, they're probably happier. Because if I just show up and Rodney is high, and I just throw some cuffs on Rodney, stuff him on an ambulance, and send him to the hospital, I don't have an emotional connection to that run. If I show up and I see Rodney sober, Rodney's just another person on the side of the road. I can smile and wave and continue to drive by. If I start to have an emotional connection with that person, and I beg and beg and beg and beg them to get treatment, and every time I see them on the side of the road, I stop and talk to them about their family, their mother, all these other things, and make that emotional connection, when I see them fall even harder than what they were before, that takes a toll out of me. I don't know if I'm making any sense or not, but it's just a lot easier for officers and for human beings in general just to compartmentalize things. This is my job. This person that I'm dealing with is a task that I have to complete in order to do my job proficiently. So if I show up on a run and I've got a person that's really high and out of their mind, flopping around, doing all the things that these people do, if I just view that as a task that I have to complete, it's very easy for me just to do that and move on to the next one without being emotionally drained. This is something that I've successfully done in my career with people that I arrest. when I first started, and this is something that all police officers go through when they first start, when you first start arresting people and you put them in cuffs and you're taking them to jail, and you see how kind of depressed that they get as they're going through this process, you develop an emotional connection with that person. It's almost impossible not to. But as you do it more and more often, especially when you start arresting the same people that you felt sorry for previously, and you arrest them for doing the same thing again, many of those people are domestic violence suspects. You start to realize, you know what? I need to compartmentalize this. It's not my fault this person is going to jail. It's their fault. They made bad decisions. Therefore, it's my job to get them in jail, get them in court, and do the things that I have to do, because this is the task that society has handed down to me. I still am not quite at the point where I do that with the people who are suffering from mental illness and bad drug reactions and stuff. But I can tell you that I'm getting a lot closer, because I don't think I can continue to do this for another 10 to 15 years. I don't think I can do that and be able to maintain my own mental health. And one of the other things that's worth mentioning when it comes to especially mental health treatment and stuff, if you go to a lot of these mental health facilities and you talk to the people who are dealing with these people day in and day out, and they're responsible for their care, they do, for the most part, compartmentalize these patients. They don't have that emotional connection with them. So when you walk into a room with a mental patient, I've taken many people to mental facilities, usually they're pretty cold when they're dealing with that person. They're just, okay, what's your name? Are you seeing or hearing things that other people can't see? What are you afraid of? Do you feel safe in your home? Like all these very standardized questions, and people will want to kind of open up their heart and talk to these people, and the people kind of treat them relatively coldly. It's because you have to do that as a human being in order to continue to do this for a longer period of time. So it's one of the reasons that I get so frustrated with people who talk about how, yeah, cops are just assholes. They show up and they don't care about people. They just care about getting them over and moving on to the next one. Well, as your career goes on, that's something that you have to do as a police officer. It's really hard for me to put into words, but I don't know. I do hope that it's something that people will take into consideration, I guess, because without realizing that police officers are just as human as the people that they're dealing with, and that there might be some more reasons why the police officers are doing the things that they're doing, people won't understand what it is that the police actually need. And it kind of goes into all these different kinds of calls for reforms, this, that, and the other thing. They don't know what it is that the police are doing. They don't know why the police are doing that. Therefore, they don't know what it is that the police need to become better at what they do, if that makes any sense. I don't know. I think I've rambled on enough. I hope you enjoyed my TED Talk today. I'm going to go home now. I'll talk to you later.